Take Projection.
Welcome to Check Your Shelf, the official book podcast of the Alabama Take Network. My name is Jamie, and I'm here with my co-host, Jennifer.
Hello.
Hello, Jennifer. We're getting ready to talk books, as usual.
Yes.
On this podcast. And like we don't talk about books all the time in real life.
Every day.
Every single day, it seems like there's text.
Mm-hmm.
Text and lots of book communication. So it just makes sense that we have a podcast. So speaking of
lots
books,
of screenshots.
What are you reading? Have you read anything this past month since we recorded last time that kind of stood out or that you want to recommend to listeners?
I do. Okay, so this is our romance episode. So what I'm about to suggest is also a romance, but it's a very popular author is Allie Hazelwood. And she's known for writing STEM romances. Like the women are always in STEM. They're always super smart. You know, there's like a lot of witty banter. And so that's pretty much her vibe. Okay, so she went a totally new route and she wrote a paranormal romance. It's like a vampire and a werewolf. Like they're I don't know the word for a group of their pack. Their pack they're trying to form an alliance within their packs. And so they're basically like in an arranged marriage.
Okay.
But it still had all of her typical smart, like the female is a smart girl and she's not a damsel in distress. You know, it has all of that, but it's just a whole new take on her typical writing because it dives a little bit into fantasy. And I loved it. I've decided that is what she needs to write from here on out.
And what's
she
it
did it
called?
so well. It's called Bride.
Bride. I've seen that all over my Goodreads. There are several people I know who are reading that right now.
It's on. It's in Times Square up on the Amazon, whatever where the bestsellers from Amazon get their little book on Times Square. That's the book that's there right now.
And what else does she write? She's not the lessons in chemistry lady, is she?
No. She has written Love Theoretically. Why'd you ask me that? I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting the names of her books.
Well, now that you say Love Theoretically, I think she has shown up in the Book of the Month picks, now that I'm thinking
her
about
books
it.
are always in Book of the Month. Yeah. Okay. Love on the Brain, The Love Hypothesis, Love Theoretically. Yeah. And they're always STEM focused books. And actually, oddly enough, her little paranormal one also has some STEM in it. She likes to do that. Also, what I don't know if every reader does this, but I get I take deep dives into learning about the authors sometimes. And she's actually from Germany, and she's a neuroscientist working in America and writes romance novels on the side.
Wow.
I was pretty impressed.
That is very impressive.
So I guess that is why she always focuses on having women in STEM in her books.
Okay. Well, that's cool.
Reminded me of the girl, what's her name, from The Big Bang Theory and Blossom and all that.
That's who I was thinking of, Maya Bialik.
Yeah.
Because she's like a is she a neurophysicist or neuroscientist?
I think so.
Or
something. She's a something neuro.
Smart.
Yeah. It made me think of people like her. It's like, oh, you must have more hours in your day. So, yeah, that's my standout unique book for this month, just because it was a whole different vibe than her normal books.
Okay.
And she did it so well.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
So what's yours?
Mine is actually a cookbook. I was really excited that was coming out. It's called Company, The Radically Casual Art of Cooking for Others by Amy Thielen. I listened to the Splendid Table podcast, and they have a lot of chefs on there who have published books. So a lot of times, like when I'm listening to the episode, I'll look up and see what they've published. And she was on there. And this book is basically, it's like cooking for large groups. So she has like a section for 6 to 8, 8 to 10. She's got one where it's like cooking up for 40 people. And it's sample menus and the recipes that go along with it. I would recommend that you check this out from the library maybe and not purchase it, because it's one of those cookbooks where I had to Google some of the ingredients, and not like the ingredients deep in the recipe, like in the title of the recipe. Like I did not know what some things were. So she cooks with really fancy and rare ingredients. So, but it was a great book. It's fun. The pictures are amazing. It's fun to go through and think about, like, you know, if you ever have dinner parties or anything, like, but just maybe theoretically, not anything. I
was about to ask you, do you cook for large groups often?
Well, we actually, my husband and I had just decided we're going to start having family over. We're going to try to do that like once a month. And, you know, I struggle with it. So I'm like, I need to get better at it. And then also when I start thinking about, like, I can pull it off for 3 people, but now if we're going to have 8 or 10, I was like, I need to up my game. Yeah. There was a recipe in this book though for deviled egg dip that I was really intrigued by, and it was not difficult. It didn't seem difficult at all, but yeah, it was fun. I love bringing home cookbooks from the library, like the brand new ones, and going through and just looking through them and seeing what they have. 'Cause there's so many and it's one of the, at least at our library, it's one of the highest circulating nonfiction genres that we have. 'Cause, you know, it's like they're expensive and people don't want to, you know, it's like, what if I buy this $40, $50 cookbook and then I never really use it? So, so we try to keep the new stuff available for people. So, but it's called Company, The Radically Casual Art of Cooking for Others by Amy Thielen. So that's kind of my standout for the month.
I love that. I don't ever buy cookbooks. I am such a Google a recipe kind of girl. So I love that.
Cool. Cool. I Google a lot too.
Yeah, I'm a Googler. So.
I have owned a cookbook before and then still Googled the recipe out of it. It's like if we decide to make it and then it's not right where I could put my hands on it, and I will Google. So, yeah. And also I don't want to mess up my books.
Right. You don't want to get fingerprints or food or anything on them. Yeah.
And my son has started collecting cookbooks. So we are overrun with awesome brand new cookbooks right now. So
does it have a pretty cover? Is it one you would want to put like on an easel on your countertop?
Yes. Oh. You were reading my mind. Yes, exactly.
I do like using cookbooks for that. For art.
I mean, I may never cook you anything out of it, but look how lovely this is. And it really
Well, you already have me wanting to Google the deviled egg dip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we may have to try that one.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about Book of the Month?
Yes. I actually skipped one, January? I don't know. I skipped a month. It was
January because it was the first month. This was a regular segment.
Oh.
And you had skipped it.
Yes. Okay. I skipped January. So I was actually very excited for my February box. I did Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I think I'm saying her last name correctly. And then I did an add-on of Butcher and Blackbird. Butcher and Blackbird was actually so popular that it was sold out for a little while. And then all of a sudden it was there again and I squealed. I was so excited I could add it on.
I think I added it on last month. Yeah.
And I have actually read both of those. My favorite book of February is probably going to be Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. It was fantastic. It is a romance. And a lot of people hate an accidental pregnancy trope. I think they hate it because usually in a romance it all ties up neatly, and that's not like real life, you know?
Right.
So I think a lot of people hate that. But actually, she wrote it really well, and it wasn't all neat and tidy, and it was good. It was very realistic, and it made me, I was washing dishes. I was actually ended up getting it on Audible, and I was washing dishes listening to it, and I had like tears streaming down my face. It was so good. It was beautiful.
And that was your actual February or January pick, right? It was one of
that was my actual pick. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. What were yours?
I think all of them but that. I overdid it. I went bananas. I got The Resort by Sarah Oaches, which is the one I'll come back and talk about. I love nonfiction, and they only will throw a nonfiction in there once or twice a year. So I got it, and it's called More, a Memoir of Open Marriage by Holly Roden Winter. Kristen Hanna's The Women, Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli, and The Mayor of Maxwell Street by Avery Cunningham. So I loaded up. I hit the max. But I read The Resort.
Oh, it was a thriller, right? Mm-hmm. Did you like it?
No. It's the only time I've ever just not liked a book from Book of the Month. And I kept thinking, well, it'll get, it's going to get better. There's going to be a twist. And then I was like halfway through the book and I was still there. And then I guess about 2/3 of the way through, you get a twist and there's a lot of potential, but I don't know. It was just problematic. So, and I'm so ashamed. I only gave it 2 stars on Goodreads, but I wrote a full review. Like I never write a review, but I'm like, if I give this book 2 stars, I have to tell, I have to say,
you have to explain yourself
because this, yeah. And it was just, there were continuity issues with the time, like things didn't add up. And that kept bothering me. And it has to be really bad for stuff like that to stick out to me. And there were some red herrings that weren't really effective. And also, I figured out the villain way too quickly. And that is also not something that I usually do. Like a lot of times with these thrillers, when I finish it, I feel like they wrote this for me. Like I was who was in their head because I had no clue. Like the twist, just, I put the book down and I'm like, oh my God. Like that's usually how I read these things. And this one, I was like, oh, great. Okay. I know who this is. But also I read through some other reviews that thought the book was problematic. And one of the things that people kept pointing out, and it was exactly how I felt when I was reading it, but I didn't include it in my review. There's a character who is on anxiety medication and she gets it legally. She has like severe panic disorder or something, obviously. And the whole book is like basically shaming her for being on this medicine. Yeah.
That's unusual.
It's like she hides it. And then it's like, if anybody finds out I have to take this medicine, they're going to, my fiance won't love me anymore or and it's like, it's a dirty secret to her. And I just feel like this day and time, that's not cool at all because there's a lot of people on it. There's a lot of people who are on it and don't want to be on it and have these feelings already. And that's not what I feel like we need to reflect back at people,
right.
in a book.
And although I think there are people who feel that way, I you don't, I don't remember, I don't ever see that in books. It's usually a positive, like mental health, positive, like, you know, positive for your mental health. Yeah.
And totally like normalizing it. And, you know, this is just something that people do. But I was like, they really laid into that, and I wasn't crazy about it. So, but I did read I read an add-on this month also. And I think I had actually just started it when we recorded last time, so I may have mentioned it. It was called Northwoods by Amy Peace. It was also a thriller, and it was excellent. Like, I kept going back to it and thinking about it, and it was like, yes, it was a thriller and there was a mystery and all this, but it's set in a place, a small town, like a rural town, where the opioid epidemic has kind of overtaken that. Like, a lot of the locals have it. A lot of the visitors who come, you know, are struggling with it. But then there's also like the big business aspect of it. Like, they're opening rehab centers in this area to make money, and doctors are tied in. And it was really good. And it really makes you think about the opioid epidemic, like, in a big way. And I've read nonfiction books that make you do that, but like, this was like just built into the life of this small town. But the characters were amazing. You know, series fiction is a lot of times not my favorite thing, but when I finished this book, I immediately thought, if she turns this into a series, I'm going to read these, because I love these characters enough and I want to see what happens next with them. So, but that's called Northwoods by Amy Peace, Pease. And it was not an actual book of the month pick, but it was one you could add on.
I love the add-ons.
I do too. They do such a good job with those.
I'm really surprised that Bride, the Ali Hazelwood book, hasn't been an add-on, because all of her books have been add-ons.
Well, so I want them to make it an add-on for February, because I think you kind of got me sold on that. I want to read it now.
Yeah, it's good.
Are you ready to talk about your favorite genre of books?
I am. I was waiting on you to. I'm ready, girl.
So the way we decided to do this is I'm basically going to interview Jennifer, because she is very prolific in this subject matter. I am not, and I want her to convince me why I should read more romance. Okay, Jennifer, my first question for you is, what made you start reading romance? And I want to know about how old you were. Like, if this was something you've read, you know, as a teenager, or if it's fairly new.
That's funny to me when you sent me the question and asked how old I was, because it's actually very new. Pretty much. Okay. So my reading life several years ago, you know, we homeschooled, and it kind of centered around whatever we were going to read in our homeschool. So 10 years ago, I was mostly reading like middle grade novels, but I loved them. I mean, like Gary Schmidt and like that book Wonder, you know, that they ended up making the movie out of. I mean, I loved them, but that was just the phase of life I was in. So then I got in really deep into historical fiction. I probably read every World War II book there was during that that time, like, you know, The Nightingale or all the Kate Quinn books. Then around 2020, I started reading a lot of nonfiction. I think a lot of us did, because there was a lot going on in the world. You know, I started reading a lot of like How to Be an Anti-Racist, and also a lot of, I guess you would call them self-help, how to be a better person kind of books. But I started feeling just bored with my reading life. Like I would go through, you know, every list and nothing sounded good. And I felt I was in a real rut. And I know most of the time when people get in a rut, they change genres, is what I have found to be with a lot of people. So I was getting my hair done, and the girl doing my hair, I was telling her I was in a rut. Nothing sounded good. Could not find anything to read. And she said, okay, I'm going to tell you about this series. Don't judge me. She said, hear me out. It's a fantasy, but it's romance, and they're also fairies.
Okay.
And I was like judging her. And I don't know how this series had not been on my radar, because it is when I say it, everybody's gonna be like, of course. It was the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Okay.
I had probably seen it in Books A Million, but because I wasn't reading romance, it wasn't, or fantasy at the time, it wasn't something I looked at when I would go in bookstores. So I went home, and they were free on their own Hoopla. So I downloaded them, and I was still giving her a little bit of side eye. I was like, some fairies, and they're fae. Now that I know about the fantasy world, they're fae. They're not fairies.
Oh, tell them what they are.
They're fae. Okay. So I was so hooked. And when I finished the series, I immediately started over, because there are moments in the series where you're like, oh, now that I know what I know, I want to see it beforehand, you know? I mean, you know how that is in books. Now that you know what you know, you want to see it with that knowledge. So then what happened, this is such a long-winded version of how I got into romance. But an acquaintance of mine, I noticed on Goodreads, she had also read them. And I didn't really know anybody besides the girl who did my hair that I could talk to about them. And she's not a real texter. And so I would try to text her, and she would never respond. And I needed someone to talk about them with. So I noticed an acquaintance of mine had read them. So I messaged her on Facebook, and I was like, what else has this vibe? She and I have become like the best of friends. We have talked every single day since that message. And we go to dinner once a month now. So not only did I love that series, but it also brought one of like my dearest friends into my life, which I think is, maybe that's why ACOTAR is very special to me. But she is a very prolific romance reader, and her list for me, I will probably never delete our texts or messages, no matter how much storage space I need in my phone, because it's like it is the greatest resource for romance recommendations from her. So that was my gateway. That's my long way of saying A Court of Thorns and Roses series was my gateway into romance.
Okay.
And yes, it is fantasy, but it's romantasy, I guess. That's what they label it as, romantasy.
Okay.
But I also, when you dive into that, to romance, you do typically get into contemporary romance as well. And so I kind of go back and forth now. I read contemporary romance and fantasy romance, mostly. That's the majority of my reading life. So that is my long-winded explanation of how I got into romance. It all started with A Court of Thorns and Roses and my hairdresser telling me not to judge it till I try it.
I've heard so many good things about those. Is it Sarah Maas? Is that
Sarah J. Maas? Yeah.
Okay.
She
I've
also
heard really good things about those.
That's the only series of hers that I've read, but I really want to read her others. Crescent City just came out with the most recent one. I've heard that her best work is the Throne of Glass series, and they're I guess it would be upper YA, but I really want to read them, but there's like a lot of them, and they're thick books.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think maybe 8 or 9 books, and they're big. I know.
They might be great, though.
Everybody I have talked to, honestly, I know this is a bold statement, but they always say the word they use is "it changed my life," and I'm like, really? Like,
Now I'm wanting to read them.
I know they say it changed my life. I don't think.
And tell me, what's that series again?
Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas.
And you said it's upper YA. Is that romantasy also?
I think it does have romance, but I think it is mostly fantasy.
Okay.
There seems to be a distinction between fantasy with romance and romance with fantasy. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. Yeah, yeah,
and
it does.
think it's a fantasy first and foremost.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next question is when I just saw it written down, I was like, this sounds like it will be very easy to oversimplify. But I wanted you to dig deep on this one. Who do you think the target audience is for romance novels now? And because you can't just say like middle-aged women. Like, I want to know like the psychological makeup of who you think is reading these books.
You know, I am shocked. I'm in the Bookstagram world, you know, and let me back up. First of all, I have a 9th grade daughter. When her friends come spend the night and they bring a book to read, they're bringing the same books I'm reading.
Really?
Yes, and these are 9th graders.
Okay.
My 20-year-old, she just finished cosmetology school. And whenever I would go to her school, whenever there was a lot of downtime, girls would just kind of be like laying around reading and stuff in between clients. They were reading what I was reading. So now let's jump into my Bookstagram world. I've made a lot of friends and we have like little private chats and stuff. And I'm not the oldest in the chat, but I'm close to the oldest. I'm probably second oldest. So it's anywhere from 25-year-olds to my real life friend that I talked about ACOTAR with, you know, she's 53. So I don't know that it's definitely not an age
right
thing. It's more about what you're wanting from your reading, I think, than an age genre. I'm the worst about boxing people into, like, I'll say, well, that's a male book. That's what boys read, or, you know, so I'm really bad about boxing people in, but I have not been able to figure out how to box romance. And also what I've noticed, I work at a bookstore. We're not open yet, but I do work at it. And we've had some pop-up events. And I am shocked at, like, Tessa Bailey is a pretty spicy romance author. And her characters are typically in their early 30s or late 20s. And I am shocked at the old ladies who will come to our pop-up thing. When I say old, I'm saying they're probably close to 80 years old. And they were buying Tessa Bailey books. Mm-hmm. And I just was shocked. Like, I thought that when you turn into an old lady, you have to read like Karen Kingsbury and the Christian romance, you know? And I would try to direct them to those books. And they were like, what about this one? I've seen this one a lot. And I'm like, okay. So I have not figured out a way to box in romance. And I wonder, romance is the most popular genre at the moment. Mm-hmm. They're putting out the most titles, publishers are, in romance. And I wonder, can you hear my cat?
I can.
This is my ginger cat that's going to annoy us. I'm sorry. It's my very vocal cat.
That's okay. Book people love cats, so
they do. So what I've decided, I think it goes along with kind of why I started reading romance. I think people, and I've heard this from a lot of people, the world feels hard to live in sometimes. It's getting we're bombarded by negativity constantly. And I think most people that I talked to started reading romance around the same time that I did. And I think it's because it's an escape from the negativity. That's what I've decided.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
So there was like a little author's note in one of my favorite authors' books, and she was talking about how she used to like turn her nose up at romance because it's just fluff, and she preferred to look like she was really smart and read high quality literature, So then she finally read her first romance, and she goes on in this author's note to talk about how you feel when you read different genres and the anticipation that you have while you're reading it. And she says, but guess what kind of anticipation romance novels use? Positively balanced. And I thought, that's exactly why I read romance, because the whole time, no matter what the people are dealing with, it's going to end good. You have something to look forward to.
Yeah.
So, and I really do think that's why romance is the most popular genre at the moment.
I've never thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm. Because everyone right now is bombarded by negativity, and it has become a positive escape for people.
That makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about because it's not like I hate romance, in general, but I just generally, with my books, I want, romance can be a part of it, but it can't be, the whole point. Mm-hmm. But then also, and you and I have talked about this before, the stuff I read is the kind of stuff I have to take a break from, because it is a murder mystery set in, a place where
heavy.
It's very heavy, or it's Stephen King, or it's it doesn't end well. So you kind of take it with you. So this is really, I think this is really interesting, because I've never thought about just not having to have that anticipation of who's gonna survive.
And when you read historical fiction, it's usually, I was about to ask you if you had read The Women yet, because historical fiction is usually sad. And
I have not read The Women yet, because I have heard from several people that it is going to be tough like that.
It's tough. A friend of mine, she just finished it, and she cracked me up. She texted me after she finished. She said, "I have finished A Tale of Woes." So it's sad. It's sad. But that's an aside. But yeah, so I think it has less to do with any type of demographic and more to do with what's going on in the world and what people are wanting in life right now. That's what I've decided.
That makes sense.
I talk to people all the time who used to read basically how I read, and now they read romance.
Well, and I think about it too. That Legends and Lattes book that I talked about for several months, that's not. I think one of the reasons it was so charming was because it ended well. Mm-hmm. And that was the first cozy anything ever I had read. So I don't know.
It gave you a happy feeling when you finished in it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. You're really making me think about some things. So what's your favorite trope? You really are. I promise. You really are. You really are. What's your favorite trope in romance?
So I have three that I tend to gravitate towards, but I will read. God, now I have to back up. Wait a second. Do I have three or do I have more? I love, and I don't know if this is a trope or a subgenre, but I love when there's some time travel or slips of time. I love that. I don't think that's necessarily a trope, but maybe a little magical realism.
Okay.
I really gravitate towards that in books. But if a book is set in a small town and gives me that Gilmore Girls vibe, you can just about bet I'm going to read it. Like, there's always going to be a meddling old lady. There's always going to be some quirky neighbor that's a weirdo, you know. There's going to be a grumpy person. There's, you know, I think I'm always chasing the Gilmore Girls vibe in my small town books. So any way that you can recreate Gilmore Girls, Luke and Lorelai, any of that in a book, I'm there. Another one I love, and I think it's because it reflects my marriage, is a grumpy sunshine trope. I hope he's got his AirPods in right now and didn't hear me say that.
Explain what a grumpy sunshine is.
Okay. So he's just real stoic and like, you know, no nonsense kind of person. And she comes into his life and she's just all happy and forces him to lighten up, and she usually kind of like poking the bear, you know, constantly. And but also what's typically the case in a grumpy sunshine trope is that underneath his grumpiness, he's kind of like a sweet cinnamon rolly. That's a romance phrase. He's a sweet cinnamon roll. I know, like, you know, he may look grumpy and he may growl and be like, oh, that's dumb. But
right.
But then he does really sweet things. So I love a grumpy sunshine.
Okay.
Yeah, those are mine. So some grumpy sunshine, some small town, and some magical realism. Even better is if you can get all three of those in one book. and I have found a few. Like in the cozy fantasy subgenre. I found a few that felt that way. So yeah, that's my tropes.
I like that.
I know.
So how do you choose books because of these tropes, or do you look at the covers and they stand out, or is it specific authors, recommendations, what you see on Bookstagram? Like, how do you choose your
everything,
books?
all the above. I will say I have, like, my Bookstagram is really taken off, and I see more books than I will ever be able to read in a lifetime on Bookstagram. One thing that has happened I get a lot of advanced readers copies, and so that tends to be how I choose my books lately. I need to quit getting so many advanced readers copies because they're not always, usually actually they are good, but sometimes they're not. And then I feel like I've wasted time on a book that I shouldn't have. I could have read something better, you know? So that tends to be how I've been choosing my books lately, because I have to read them, and I don't love that feeling, like having to read it, you know?
It's assigned.
Yeah, it's
homework.
It's
assigned reading.
So I've been trying to sign up, and they're not like seeking me out. I'm a glutton for punishment, and I go sign up for these books, and then I'm like, man, I could have read something else, you know? Also, there are some Bookstagram accounts that have never led me wrong. And if they love a book, at this point, I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to love it. One is Rate the Romance. She and I must have the same reading taste, because if she says a book is 5-star, it's going to be 5-star for me too. And also, I've made all these friends on Instagram, and they're constantly sending me books, or not sending, like, DMing me a suggestion, or here's what I just read and I absolutely loved it. And I feel like that's probably the main way, because a friend recommended it, and it's a trusted friend who reads kind of how I read. Okay. And then, of course, there are my tried and true. I'm saying that wrong.
No, that's right.
my authors that I'm going to read no matter if they wrote the ingredients on a shampoo bottle. I would read what they wrote. Right. And there's a handful of those that if they're putting something out, I'm reading it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's pretty much suggested from other romance readers how I get my TBR.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then kind of to like finish out this conversation, I want 2 different sets of recommendations from you. So for the first set, I want you to recommend 3 books for reluctant romance readers. Like if you've got somebody you're trying to convince that they will love this genre, they just don't know it yet. What 3 books would you recommend?
Okay. I was thinking about this. I have a friend who is a reluctant romance reader because it makes her think of the Fabio bodice ripper books, and that it's just going to all be one thing. But I do actually think romance authors these days write really good plot and depth, and the romance just happens to be part of the plot. You know what I mean? Like, I would say it almost feels like a women's lit crossover a lot of times.
Yeah. Okay.
So, okay. Can I give you more than 3?
How many is more than 3, Jennifer? I have to watch
thinking
you.
Like 5. Okay.
Yes,
5.
5 is good. 5 is good.
All right. A lot of people don't realize that Taylor Jenkins Reid used to write romance. They re-released, I think it was like 3 or 4 books a few years ago. They re-released them like with new covers, new audio narrators. So 2 of them that I really loved. One was called After I Do, and it's like a marriage in crisis romance. But it definitely has the women's lit crossover, and there was so many. It's a lot of things happening in her family at the time, and it's kind of like when you've been married so long, and this spouse is also part of your family. How do you navigate that when he's your family's family too? And that was a big part of the plot.
Okay. That sounds good.
And
I love her.
After I Do is probably one of my very favorite romances. Another one, and it's been a long time since I read it by her, called One True Loves, but I see it constantly, so people love it. I remember the gist of it, but it's probably been 10 years since I've read it. So I guess I did read romance at one time too.
You just didn't know it.
I didn't read it like I do now.
Something else. Yeah.
One very popular, Emily Henry. Her books are well written. There's going to be really good depth in them. There's going to be a good plot. It's going to have a little bit of everything. Probably my favorite Emily Henry book is Book Lovers. I think it came out a few years ago, but yeah.
Okay.
It's good. Another is Catherine Center. I've read everything she's ever written. She writes clean romances. I saw an interview with her, and her husband's a middle school teacher. So she always makes sure her books are clean because she knows how nosy middle schoolers are. And she never wants to know that one of his students has picked up one of her books and it wasn't a clean romance, Right. I thought that was cute.
That is.
My favorite of hers is Hello Stranger. She's the one who I read the little excerpt from her author's note a few minutes ago where she talked about the positive anticipation. Okay, how many is that? I've done 3. Let me give you one more.
Okay.
This is another clean romance series. Sarah Adams, the When in Rome series. These are the small town setting I was talking about. They give you the Gilmore Girl vibes. And so the first one is like this famous girl comes into town and has car trouble. Like she's just passing through and her car can't get fixed. And she ends up having to stay with the grumpy guy in town because there's no room in any of their bed and breakfasts. And And he's, it's a grumpy sunshine and he's a cinnamon roll, it turns out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one in the series is called Practice Makes Perfect. And the female from the first book, her bodyguard falls in love with the sister of the guy in the first book.
Okay.
So these are all going to be what you would call interconnected series.
Yeah, so you've got the same characters or at least connections to characters, but new stories.
It's either like a best friend group or a family or something in those. Yeah.
Okay.
And you said earlier you don't love a series, but I kind of do love a series because I feel like I really grow attached to the characters over the series.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like I say, I don't like series. My best case scenario is that I fall so in love with the book and the characters that I want more. Like kind of like even the Northwoods I was talking about, or Northwood that I was talking about earlier. Like I would continue to read that, but it's like I've got like Harry Potter on such a pedestal. And that's not the only, there have been several series throughout my life that I've loved, but it's like, I want a series. Like, I feel like I sound like just a grumpy old lady on here sometimes because I'm like, the book has to be good. The book can't waste my time. I don't want a series, but it's like, I'm just like everybody else. I really do. So,
you're just a very discerning reader. You're not going to just read any old thing. And I think that's good.
Yeah. Well, and I'm bombarded with books, like, you know what I mean?
You're
like, because I'm a librarian. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then working specifically with nonfiction, like that's what I see the most of. And, and that's what I order and that's what I research. And it's like, I'm always wanting to read it. So when I read fiction, like I want it to be solid. So you're saying that series you love like that, right? With those characters.
Mm-hmm. And
that was.
It also has a lot of, it made me laugh out loud. I mean, they're funny. And also she's not too far from here. She lives in Nashville. So,
okay.
So I always, whenever I'm in Nashville, I'm like, ooh, maybe I'll run into Sarah Adams. But she does events at like Parnassus Books and stuff, but it's never when I can go. So I would say she's probably, like Emily Henry, every romance person has read Emily Henry. I would say Sarah Adams is probably not quite to that level, but her books are very good.
Okay, that leads us to this next set of recommendations. I want 3 recommendations that prolific romance readers might not have read yet. So somebody where this is their number one genre and they come to you and they're like, give me something good that I haven't already read. What 3 books would you recommend?
I've got it. All right. This is a friend of mine's book. Like I read her book and then made her my friend. We'll say that. She's a debut, like this is her first book. She's a school teacher. So it's not like she's trying to, well, she may want to become a famous author. I would say anyone who writes a book hopes that's the goal. But,
right.
The author's name is Amy Hyde and it's a sports romance called The Closer. Now, I follow no sports. So I actually had to ask my husband if that's an actual baseball position.
Oh.
And he was like, are you kidding? I don't follow sports, so I wasn't in it for the sports. So he's the closer for the Yankees in the book. She's a Broadway star. And it's really just a book about how 2 famous people figure out how to navigate being famous while also falling in love, keeping that private. And it's just all the intricacies of fame, long distance. I mean, there's a lot of times they have to be long distance, all of that. This book, one thing I keep seeing reviews, and I agree with this, it doesn't really have tropes. Most romance books have tropes. This one doesn't have that. it's just a realistic representation of what it's like figuring out how to be in a relationship. And it's called The Closer by Amy Hyde.
So that might be attractive, even though this is a different sport, to like the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift watchers, where it's like, which granted she's on the road as much as he is, but that's interesting. That sounds really good.
I loved it. I mean, she's getting out there. She's gotten picked up by a PR company that's helping get her book out there, and I hope it gets out there more because I really liked it.
Where is she from?
California.
Okay.
So my real life friend that I said I would never delete our text because she recommends the best books. She won this book in a giveaway, and she didn't know anything about the book or the author or anything. And she liked it so much. She texted me and she was like, I need you to read this book because I can't get over how much I liked it. And it's her debut novel and no one on earth seems to have heard of it. And it's so good. So we kind of befriended this author and started trying to get her name out there to other romance readers.
We should put this one up on our Instagram too, in case people are interested in reading it.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds really really good. What's your next one?
I've decided I'm the only person who's read this book. And the author doesn't even have like an author social media. I don't know how I found this book. It's called The Memories of Us by Vanessa Carnival. So I loved it. I mean, so the girl gets amnesia. She's in a car wreck and gets amnesia. And she's trying to figure out who she is. So she moves back to her like hometown where her family house is still there, but it's like for sale. And she takes it off the market and moves back into it because she's just trying to figure out who is she because she has amnesia. So she starts falling for her neighbor. And I can't give too much because there's a pretty surprise twist. But she falls for her neighbor, and she does start figuring out who she is and what makes her happy. And that's really all I can say without giving away too much. I don't know how much is too much with spoilers. I never know. So
it's hard to know sometimes with these.
It is. I've actually read this one multiple times, and I have it on audio because I don't know. I just love it. So, and this is actually one I read before I read romance. So, which is also odd to me because I don't know how I found it, how it crossed my radar. I first read it probably 5 or more years ago, and it has remained as one of my favorite obscure, lesser-known romance novels. And I think this author maybe has only written this. The Memories of Us by Vanessa Carnival.
Okay.
And I had the best luck a few weeks ago. So, one of the local public libraries is kind of culling their shelves, and they have just a huge bin of free books that just weren't doing a lot in circulation. There were 2 copies of this book in it.
Wow.
And they were free. So I got both copies. I thought, I could keep one and maybe like have one to let people borrow or.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You put it in your little free library.
No, I don't know if I can part with it. I think I need both. Okay. So my last one, she's actually an author who lives here in Alabama, Juliana Smith. And her most recent book just released this week, and I read it. It's called A Rock in a Hard Place. And it is it's a second chance romance. I feel like it very accurately depicts how hard marriage is when you have babies or toddlers. And they end up divorcing, but now the kids are bigger, and this is them giving it a second chance and figuring out where they went wrong and how to start fresh. And it was just beautiful.
That sounds good. All of these sound so good, Jennifer. You picked good books.
Well, I read good books.
You're making me want to read a romance novel that's not about two serial killers.
Okay. So I have to tell you, though, the owner of the bookstore that I will be working at, she reads a lot like you read. She needs a little more in her reading usually. But the Butcher and Blackbird, the serial killer book was, she's in a book club, and that's what they picked, which was funny to me that's what they're reading in a book club. And she loved it. Like, really? Loved it. Yes. She kept texting me throughout. She was like, I'm dying laughing right now. Or like, yeah, loved it.
Well, I have it on deck.
Is it the physical book or the audio that you have on deck?
Both, actually. I bought it on Audible first, and then when it showed up as an add-on for Book of the Month last month, I went ahead and got the...
Okay, because the audio is one of the best audios I think I've heard in a long time.
Oh, it's great.
So That's good. Great. So good. The bookstore owner, friend of mine, actually, she texted me that too. She said, I think I could listen to these narrators forever. Anything they read, I could listen to it. It was good.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah. So a good narrator makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Can I go rogue for a second? And
you sure can.
All right. So my very favorite genre, but I don't read enough of it, is the fantasy romantasy. And the reason I don't read enough of it is because they're usually long series and they're thick. And they require a lot of brain because of world building and things like that, you know? So right. I want to recommend a few if you want some fantasy romance. My very favorite fantasy romance series is the From Blood and Ash series by Jennifer Armentrout. I'm actually behind on that series because she keeps writing them and they're not short, and I'm not caught up on it, but that is, unless the one I haven't read yet sucks, it's still my favorite fantasy series. The King and Coven series by Madeline Elliott is one of my very favorite fantasy romance series. And I'm actually like on her little street team. And she picked me to be a beta reader, but I don't know that I'm going to be a good beta reader. You would be a great beta reader.
How so?
Well, like when you were talking about that thriller earlier and how there were continuity issues and things like that. Like one of the things to be a beta reader, she wanted us to look for like grammatical errors or timeline issues. But if I like the book, it's like my brain just goes into a fog and I don't notice those things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I might not be a good beta reader, but I'm trying. I'm going to try. Okay. And the last recommendation for fantasy romance is the Crowns of Nyaxia series by Carissa Broadbent. It was actually an indie series and it got picked up by a traditional publisher, so it can be found in stores. So, I mean, I think it's at Target.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great. I mean, From Blood and Ash series is also, it's a very well-known series, but I loved that the Crowns of Nyaxia was indie and got so much hype that it got picked up. So
excellent.
Great.
These are all, you've knocked it out of the park, Jennifer.
Oh, Well, thank you. I have one more book. Do you want to hear about one more book, or are we out of time?
One more book. Yeah, we've got time for one more.
All right. This was strictly based on the cover. And I'm doing this like bingo card this month, and it said I needed a mystery or a thriller. And a genre that I have realized I love is cozy mystery, like Molly the Maid, you know, that the Maid book, The Mystery Guest, that series. Those I think would be considered cozy mystery.
Yes.
So this one is a cozy mystery, but it also has a very precious romance story. Juniper Bean Resorts to Murder. And it is by Gracie Ruth Mitchell. And it's on Hoopla on audio. And I loved it. It was fantastic. It has quirky characters, a lot of wit and banter, but then a surprising amount of depth. Like, I was listening to it and I actually wished that I had the book so that I could highlight things, like really lines in the book that just made me go, wow, like really think, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So Juniper Bean.
And you said you picked that
murder.
You picked that because of the cover?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was in Barnes & Noble not just like last week, and when you said the name of it, I was like, that sounds familiar, and it stood out to me too. It has a very
whimsical cover, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I love like I mean, if you've got a title with a weird like an odd name, you know, like it stands out to me. So Juniper Bean. So it's good to hear that that's good.
It was
I may
so
officially move that to the to read.
Mm-hmm. And it got my check mark for the mystery thriller on my bingo card.
Okay.
I actually do like mysteries and thrillers that aren't happy endings, but I just haven't picked any up in a while. And this one checked that box and pleasantly surprised me in how much I loved it.
Okay. Well, that's a good note to end on. So everybody should go read a bunch of romance books, and you've got everybody situated to start or jump in wherever they're comfortable. All kinds of recommendations. Mm-hmm. Those will be in our show notes on the podcast when the podcast posts.
And I'll try to get some social media stuff going. I've been really a slacker with that social media. But I'll try to get us some pictures on social media for people to see, like some pretty covers and things.
Yeah, we've had I feel like we say this every month. You don't realize how long it takes to do the stuff like that until you try to make the time to do the stuff. Mm-hmm. So,
and we're just two busy people that
we really
are trying
to
figure out our schedules. So,
yeah. I'm hoping though we're at least on my end we're on the home stretch of all of the stuff that's
keeping you
been going
occupied.
on that we're in the middle. I was telling Jennifer earlier we're in the middle. We're about to move, and we had we planned a vacation for January. We went on a cruise because we love the holidays a lot, so January is always kind of like blah. So I was like, well, let's plan a pretty major vacation then, right after the holidays. That makes sense. And then you just forget, like. Well, also, we were not expecting the ice storm or snowstorm that the entire United States of America got. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but everything's normalizing. Spring is coming. Lots of good books are releasing.
There's a lot coming up. There's a lot coming up to talk about. Yep.
Do you want to go ahead and tell our listeners what our topic will be next month before we sign off?
Okay. So Jamie asked me, she gave me a few topics to think about, and I have so many memoirs and biographies that I keep putting off, and I don't know why I keep putting them off. So I told her we're going to talk about biographies and memoirs, and it's going to force me to check those off my TBR and get them read because I know they're fantastic. I just have been lazy or not Not lazy, I guess. I just haven't selected them. So we're doing biographies and memoirs.
And the best part will be you'll get to hear two Southern ladies have to say the word memoir like 72 times during the podcast.
Did you get tickled at how I just said it? Is that what made it?
No, I was thinking that you did a really good job, and I'm horrified at what I sound like when I say it. So, but that's what they are. So, okay. Well, thank you, Jennifer. You have been absolutely amazing as usual. You really carried the ball on this one because I didn't have a lot to contribute.
Well, you gave me great questions. Great questions. I knew you would.
So, well,
Couldn't have been done without you.
Thanks everybody for listening, and we will be back. We'll be back next month. Check out more podcasts and pop culture news on the alabamatake.com. We'll see you next month. You were frozen.
Am I frozen?
I never heard you say bye.
Because you were frozen.
No, you're not frozen now.
Oh, okay. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, what? Okay, what could you not hear? Which part? What was the last thing you heard?
The Alabama take, nah.
Okay, let me redo that. Okay. Okay, so Check Your Shelf will be back next month. In the meantime, if you want to listen to more podcasts, get your pop culture news, check out the alabamatake.com. And Jennifer, you want to throw out our Instagram?
Yes, it's Check Your Shelf Podcast on Instagram. And hopefully I will have us some good content soon.
Yeah, hang in there. Hey, yes, you're doing a great job with that. Do not worry. Okay, well, thank you for listening, everybody, and we will be back in March.
Yes. Bye, y'all.
Bye.